What are you seeing across the state right now when it comes to snowpack?
Just continued excellent conditions. We're still looking at every basin in the state of Utah greater than 160% of normal snowpack. It's really just an unbelievable season. We have a large number of our major basins that are actually greater than 200% of normal snowpack. So it's just mind-boggling how much snow there is out there. And then just looking at the entire state at once, we're currently about 195% of normal. That number is starting to become less meaningful because what's probably more interesting to viewers and to listeners is that we're well outside of the 1983 record at this point. We've now surpassed all the previous years since we started measuring snowpack at our snowtell sites, going back to the 1980 timeframe. And we now are confident to say that we have the greatest snowpack in Utah since 1952. So this puts us at the really the best snowpack that we've seen in over 70 years. We're taking the snowpack information and we're correlating it to stream flow. We're looking at how much our reservoir is going to fill up. And so what we do is we create volumetric forecasts, which look at the overall volume of water that's going to go to each one of the forecast points in the state from the beginning of April until the end of July. These are water supply forecasts. So we're looking at an overall quantity of water that's going to be available for all the things that we use water for: agriculture, municipal purposes, everything. And again, those are our volumetric forecasts for each one of the forecast points around the state. And so what we do is, again, we look at the current conditions and we create those relationships to what we're anticipating moving forward.
I was looking at the drought monitor map that came out this morning, 8 a.m. Eastern time. Droughtmonitor.unl.edu is my source for it. Colorful map. For the first time in a long time, it doesn't show a portion of central Utah in extreme drought. What are you seeing with the D word at this point?
Yeah, the D word has been on everybody's minds. And what we have seen over the course of the last year is the proportion of severe, exceptional, and extreme drought really bottoming out. And we're getting out of those really, again, terrible drought categories. And we still do have a large portion of the state in some level of drought, but it's not those three worst categories anymore. And that's been really phenomenal to see that change. It's a little bit hard to characterize what stage we are in the drought in the state of Utah because there's really no perfect way to answer that question. It's great to see the drought map getting updated with less severe categories, and that's definitely relevant. We do anticipate most of our reservoirs, with the exception of a few large ones, most of our reservoirs will fill this year. With all the snow that's all the water that's stored in our snowpack. So that's also very encouraging. And that relates to our hydrological drought concerns. What we're not going to see this year is replenishing of our most major water bodies. So the Great Salt Lake, Lake Powell downstream. We need to do a pretty good job filling up Flaming Gorge. And that's not really coming from Utah, but that's also something that's a concern because obviously there's connectivity to Lake Powell and other things. Some of our really large reservoirs like Strawberry, Bear Lake are probably not going to fill. And so there's still a need for an additional large snowpack year next year, but we're making really great progress. Some math that I did a couple of weeks ago, and I need to update these numbers, is looking at the overall precipitation deficits that we've accrued over the last several years. So in other words, when we consider 2020, 2021, 2022, how much in the hole were we from a precipitation perspective each one of those years? You can add up those deficits to get an overall, like how much down is our bank account when it comes to rain and snow. And then we look at this year and we can project forward how we're going to be at the end of September. And we do that math exercise. We see that for most of the basins in the state, we're going to cut that deficit in half or better. Some areas we're going to be fully sort of replenished. But again, for most areas of the state, this water year is going to cut that precipitation deficit in half. And that suggests that this is an outstanding water year and definitely one that we didn't see coming. But at the same time, we do still have a little ways to go to catch up in all of our hydrological drought conditions.